"If you can fix this piano, I'll give you $1 million." Chairman Arthur Kingston's voice froze the mansion. A golden piano, worth $15 million, and one of only 3 in the world, was on the verge of being scrapped. Even the world's top experts had given up on the instrument. "But if you fail, you're going to prison." His words made the eyes of Jaden Tan, a poor, new cleaner, waver. But then he lifted his head. 3 minutes is all I need." People scoffed. "He's crazy." A cleaner daring to say such a thing. But they didn't know who this humble young man in front of them once was. Before we begin, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment telling us where you're listening from. May good fortune bless you wherever you are. The young man's hands, at 28, trembled. The yellow fluorescent lights of the Geylang pawn shop cast a dismal glow. Cement dust clung to his palms like ingrained dirt, and calluses hardened every joint of his fingers. Just a month ago, these hands performed the most delicate work in the world. Europe's finest pianists would grasp them, declaring they couldn't perform without him. But now, these hands struggled to hold onto a worn leather bag. $500. No more. The pawnshop owner spat out the words curtly. Inside the bag lay a silver tuning hammer and various precision tools, neatly arranged. It was a paltry sum, one a true connoisseur would never utter. But the young man was in no position to bargain. "Please, sir, just a little more. If you only knew its real worth. To me, it's just junk." The young man's name was Jaden Tan. Until a month ago, he was the principal piano tuner at the Royal College of Music, London. At 28, he was the youngest ever to hold that position, constantly hailed as a genius. Why was such a person now pleading for $500 a pawn shop in a Singaporean heartland district? The story goes back a month, to London. That night, the main auditorium of the Royal College of Music was filled with 1,800 spectators. On stage, a magnificent grand piano awaited, and a renowned maestro, beloved across Europe, was about to perform. But his expression was troubled. He tapped the keys, his brows furrowed. Something's off. The sound is muffled. Just then, a young Asian man quietly walked out from backstage. It was Jaden. He stood before the piano, took out his tuning hammer from his leather bag, closed his eyes, and slowly pressed a key. It was a sound 100 people would deem perfect. But Jaden shook his head. A minute tremor, no thicker than a strand of hair, was hidden within. A difference most people would never notice in their lifetime. Jaden caught instantly. This was why people called him the Divine Ear. As Jaden's hands moved, the disordered notes gradually found their place. 15 minutes later, a radiant smile spread across the maestro's face. "Perfect. Only you, Jaden." The concert was a resounding success. Applause rocked the hall, and the audience rose in a standing ovation. Maestros from across Europe lined up to work with Jaden, his future shining as brightly as the London sun. But it all collapsed with a single phone call. That night, after the concert, Jaden's phone rang in his apartment. His mother's name flashed on the screen. He answered eagerly, but a stranger's voice came through. "Is this Mr. Jaden Tan? Your mother collapsed and is in the emergency room? Aggressive brain tumor." Brain tumor. Those 3 words plunged him into darkness. Jaden cancelled all his London engagements and boarded a flight to Singapore that very night. As soon as he landed, he rushed to Singapore General Hospital. Opening the ICU door, Jaden froze. His mother, lying on a white sheet, was pale and lifeless. Her once warm hands, which used to hold his so tightly, were now as withered as autumn leaves. The doctor's estimate made Jaden's vision blur again. Surgery and treatment costs soared into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Even all the money he'd saved in London wouldn't be enough. But the real hell unfolded next. It was the evening he arrived at his mother's home. The doorbell rang. When he opened it, strangers stood there. Dressed in suits, carrying briefcases, they had a chilling demeanor. "Mr. Jaden Tan, right? We're here regarding your father's outstanding debts." Jaden stared blankly, unable to comprehend. "My father passed away when I was in secondary school." "What debt?" The man opened his documents. A promissory note in his father's name, interest statements, joint guarantee papers. Jaden's eyes trembled. Principal plus interest, 300,000. The number numbed his mind. His mother had been bearing this burden alone, never saying a word to avoid hindering his studies abroad. "We'll be back in a week. Prepare $50,000 as an initial payment by then. If it's not ready, I'll leave the consequences to your imagination." After the men left, Jaden stood by the front door for a long time. His legs gave out, unable to move. From that day on, collection calls poured in. Morning, night, dawn, they rang incessantly. To restart tuning in Singapore, he needed to join a firm or build connections, but there was no time. He didn't know what would happen if he couldn't find $50,000 within a week. The surgery costs and the debt all piled onto Jaden's shoulders. Finally, at 4 a.m., Jaden stood at a labor market. There, work meant cash in hand that very day. During the day, he carried heavy cement bags at construction sites, climbing ladders. At night, he scrubbed restaurant floors. The hands that the world's greatest pianist desired to shake now developed blisters, which burst, then hardened into calluses. Cement dust clung to his fingernails, refusing to wash off. Still, at night, he headed to the hospital. Each time he opened his mother's room door, Jaden hid his hands behind his back. But one night, his mother spoke in a faint voice. "Jaden, let me see your hands." He couldn't avoid it. Jaden slowly extended his hands. His mother's frail fingers caressed his palms. Seeing his calloused, scarred hands, tears streamed down his mother's face. "Jaden, I'm sorry. I'm such a burden." "No, Mum." Jaden forced a smile, biting his lip to keep his voice from trembling. "I have a good job these days. I'm earning well. Don't worry." His mother silently shook her head, and then she held Jaden's hands tightly. The tremor from her bony hands pierced Jaden's heart like a dagger. Leaving the room, Jaden went to the emergency staircase. He sank onto the cold concrete floor, covering his mouth with both hands, crouching his body to stifle his sobs. His shoulders shook. The glittering stages of London felt like a distant past, a former life. Jaden silently broke down for a long time. But there was no time for tears. The deadline for the next surgery payment was looming. That's why Jaden stood here, in the yellow light of the pawn shop, clutching the tuning bag inherited from his mentor. The moment he let go of this bag, Jaden Tan, the tuner, would be truly finished. "Just a little more. Please, just a little more time." Jaden's voice cracked, but the pawn shop owner was cold. "This isn't a charity. Either pawn it or get out." Jaden squeezed his eyes shut. His mother's pale face came to mind. Her face, crying and apologizing for being a burden. Jaden slowly let go. "Just a week. I'll definitely come back for it." The pawn shop owner silently pushed a $500 check towards him. Jaden took it and stepped out. Rain poured outside. Jaden looked down at his empty hands. Until yesterday, they had held a tuning hammer, performing the world's most delicate work. Now, they held nothing but the smell of cement and calluses. Rain streaked his face. Tears or rainwater, he couldn't tell, ran down his cheeks. Jaden lowered his head and slowly walked away. The back of the young man, once called the London Sun, faded into the rain, growing smaller, blurring, until finally he disappeared into the darkness. As he walked in the rain that night, Jaden's phone vibrated in his pocket. A familiar name appeared on the wet screen, Professor Lim, his mentor from London. Jaden's trembling fingers pressed the answer button. "Jaden, where are you? Why does your voice sound like that?" "Professor, Words failed him. Soaked in the rain, sobs escaped. Professor Lim listened to Jaden's ragged breathing in silence for a while. Then he spoke softly. "I heard everything about your mother's hospital and the debts. An old student in Singapore contacted me." Jaden couldn't reply. He didn't want his mentor to see him like this. But Professor Lim's next words stopped Jaden in his tracks. "Jaden, there's a man named Kingston in upstate New York, a global magnate. His estate needs a caretaker." "Caretaker? Honestly, it's closer to a cleaner." "But Jaden, there's something special there." Professor Lim's voice lowered. "In that mansion, there's a Steinway golden piano, one of only 3 in the world, made of pure gold and the finest spruce, worth 15 million, one of only 3 in the world. For a tuner, it was a legendary instrument, one he might only dream of touching once in a lifetime. Just get in as a cleaner, for now. The salary is quite good, I hear. That money could help with your mother's surgery and debts. But Professor, what could I do as a cleaner?" "Jaden, listen to me carefully. No matter what, don't leave that piano side. Whether you're cleaning or scrubbing the floor, somehow, just be near that instrument. An opportunity will surely come. Just endure until then. You're the most brilliant tuner I know." Jaden stood in the rain for a long time after hanging up. Cleaner. The word stung his heart. The man who once shook hands with maestros in London, going to clean someone's floor. But soon, his mother's face came to mind. Her pale face, crying and apologizing from her hospital bed. Jaden lifted his head. Rain streamed down his face. Let pride flow away with this rain. If I can just save my mother, I'll be anything, not just a cleaner. Jaden packed his bags then and there. A week later, Jaden boarded a plane to New York. All he had was a worn backpack. Sitting in the cramped economy seat, Jaden looked out the window. The sun shone above the clouds, but its light seemed not to reach him. Jaden looked down at his palms, calloused hands, scarred fingers. Just a month ago, these hands were desired by the world's greatest maestros. Now, these hands would be scrubbing someone's floor, dusting, and clearing trash. The young man once called the magician of sound was becoming something like invisible dust. Jaden clenched his fists, and he whispered to himself, "I have to endure here. If I collapse, it's over. If I can save my mother, I'll walk into hell itself." After a 4-hour flight, he arrived in New York. From the airport, he took a bus, then a taxi. Heading deep into the forests of upstate New York, the city noise faded, replaced by endless stretches of lush trees outside the window. How far did they drive? The taxi stopped before a wall as high as a fortress, and in front of it, a massive iron stood firm. Jaden got out of the taxi and stood before the gate. He pressed the intercom, and after a moment, the gate slowly began to open. The sight that was revealed made Jaden gasp. It was less a mansion and more a palace. Dozens of windows sparkled in the sunlight, and the garden was lined with fountains and statues. The lawn alone looked like several football fields, but a strange chill permeated the grandeur. It felt like ice that wouldn't melt, no matter how much light shone on it. Jaden looked down at his worn sneakers, stained and tattered. In this opulent landscape, Jaden's figure was strikingly out of place, as if he didn't belong. But there was no turning back. Jaden swallowed hard and walked towards the mansion's entrance. "I have to survive. If I collapse here, it's truly over." As he reached the entrance, the heavy door opened silently. And from within, a man appeared. He was in his 50s, impeccably dressed in a suit. His hair was slicked back, devoid of grease, and his eyes were as cold as ice. The man scrutinized Jaden from head to toe, the worn backpack, the shabby clothes, the tattered sneakers. A slight smirk tugged at his lips. It felt like ridicule. "Jaden Tan. So you're the one Professor Lim sent." Jaden couldn't answer. The man glanced at his watch and continued, "More pathetic than I imagined. I'm Bradley, the chief butler of this estate. Consider me your superior from now on." Bradley turned his back without another glance at Jaden. Jaden silently followed him into the mansion. The corridor stretched endlessly. Expensive paintings adorned the walls, and crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling. The marble floor beneath reflected Jaden's humble figure like a mirror. Bradley stopped, without turning around, and spoke. "Remember, here, you're like invisible dust. Don't catch the chairman's eye, and don't make a sound." Jaden lowered his head, and then Bradley finally turned. His eyes were even colder. "There's a piano in the center of the living room. It's golden, so it'll stand out. Don't go within a meter of it. If even a speck of dust lands on it, you'll be kicked out without a penny. Understand?" "Yes, sir." Jaden's voice was low and subdued. Bradley snorted and walked on. Finally, they entered the living room. Jaden involuntarily stopped. In the center of the room, a golden piano gleamed. "Oh my God," Jaden gasped. It was the legendary instrument he'd only seen in pictures. Its body covered in pure gold, its soundboard made of the finest spruce, one of only 3 in the world, right before his eyes. Glistening majestically in the sunlight, it was like a crowned queen. But something was off. A strange sadness pervaded its splendor, as if the piano was holding its breath in solitude, like someone who hadn't cried in a long time. Just then, Jaden heard a sound. No one had touched the keys. Bradley was sifting through documents across the room, and Jaden was alone with the piano in the living room. Yet, from inside the piano, there was a shriek, as if a taut string was screaming on its own. A sharp, metallic, eerie sound, like metal being slowly constricted. It was as if someone was slowly strangling the piano's neck. Jaden's eyes widened. As a tuner, he had handled thousands of pianos, but he had never heard such a sound. It was a sound that could never come from a normal instrument. Something is wrong with that piano. Jaden's heart began to pound rapidly. Instinctively, he took a step towards the piano. It was a tuner's instinct. At that very moment, Bradley's cold voice cut through the air. "What are you staring at? Unpack your bags and get to work immediately. Your room is at the end of the basement." Jaden quickly averted his gaze, but the metallic shriek lingered in his ears. As Jaden turned to glance at the piano one last time, Bradley's chilling gaze pierced his back. Jayden walked heavily towards the basement. As he descended the narrow, dark stairs, the sound echoed in his mind. That piano was clearly crying in pain. Opening the door to his basement quarters, Jayden dropped his backpack in a cramped, windowless room. Cold concrete walls, a creaky old bed. It was a world away from the opulent upper floors of the mansion. Jayden sat on the bed and looked at his rough palms. $15 million piano, and I can't even touch it. I'm stuck scrubbing floors here. A bitter laugh escaped him, but his mentor's words came to mind. An opportunity will surely come. He had to endure until then. Jayden closed his eyes. The piano's shriek still faintly echoed in his ears. That sound pounded in Jayden's heart. What's happening to that piano? And will I ever be able to touch that instrument again? Only unanswered questions lingered in the darkness. At 4 a.m., Jayden woke up even before his alarm. He hadn't slept a wink all night anyway. If he closed his eyes, he heard that sound, the metallic shriek of the piano, as if it were being throttled. Why on earth is it making that sound? He tossed and turned, and soon it was morning. Jayden got out of bed and put on his worn cleaner's uniform. He donned large rubber gloves and picked up a bucket and scrub brush. Just a month ago, these hands held a silver tuning hammer. The hands that caressed Maestro's pianos were now soaked in the smell of bleach. He ascended the basement stairs and headed towards the mansion's corridor. It was an endless hallway. The marble floor was cold and hard. Jayden knelt and began to mop. He cleaned the same spot repeatedly. Before long, the part of his knee bone touching the floor began to ache. He was once hailed as the divine ear. Maestros in London lined up to work with him. But now, all he heard was the sharp drone of the vacuum cleaner. He thought of his mother. To secure next month's surgery fee, he had to endure here, no matter what. Jayden gritted his teeth and scrubbed the floor harder. About 2 hours later, he finally reached the living room entrance. As Jayden stepped in with his mop, someone blocked his path. Butler Bradley stood with his arms crossed, looking down at him. The tip of his expensive shoe landed on the floor Jayden had just cleaned. It seemed intentional. A clear shoe print remained. "Hey you, Singaporean." Bradley's voice was sharp. "Let me warn you again. Don't approach that golden piano within a meter. It's the most precious thing in this mansion." Bradley poked Jayden's chest with his finger. "Understand?" Jayden bit his lip. His fists involuntarily clenched. But he soon relaxed his grip and bowed his head. "Yes, sir." His voice was choked. Bradley snorted disdainfully and turned away. Even after he disappeared, Jayden stood there for a while. His gaze involuntarily drifted to the center of the living room. The golden piano gleamed in the morning light. It was as beautiful as when he first saw it yesterday, but equally lonely. Jayden covertly watched the piano while mopping in a distant corner. A legendary instrument, one of only 3 in the world. Its body covered in pure gold, and a soundboard made of the finest wood. A dream piano that every tuner would want to lay hands on at least once in their lifetime. And it was right there, barely 10 meters away. If only he could touch it, just once. If only he could hear it sound up close. But Jayden could only watch from afar, clutching his mop. The command not to approach within a meter acted like an invisible wall, blocking him. It was lunchtime. Jayden went to the staff canteen in the mansion's backyard. It was a small, shabby building. A few people were already seated inside, workers who maintained the grounds and security guards. As Jayden entered, their gazes turned to him. Whispers were heard. "That's the new cleaner. The Asian one. Where's he from?" Jayden pretended not to hear and sat in a corner. His tray held a cold piece of bread and soup. Then, snickers came from behind. "Hey, I saw him earlier," staring at the piano, mumbling something. "Really? Is he crazy? A cleaner, acting like he's some kind of musician." Laughter erupted. Jayden didn't lift his head. He slowly chewed and swallowed the cold bread. There was no need to respond. These people wouldn't believe that even the principal players of the London Philharmonic wouldn't take the stage without Jayden's tuning. Explaining would only get him labeled a madman. He remembered his mentor's words, "No matter what, don't leave that piano's side. An opportunity will surely come." He had no choice but to hold on to that belief and endure. It was late afternoon, nearing the end of his cleaning shift. The mansion's massive clock chimed 5 times, 5 p.m. As Jayden was doing his final mop in a corner of the living room, heavy footsteps echoed from the upstairs staircase. He looked up to see an old man slowly descending. A dignified posture, a proud build, with snow-white hair, yet his eyes were sharp. Jayden knew instinctively. This was the owner of the mansion, Chairman Arthur Kingston. The chairman descended the stairs and stopped in the middle of the living room. He stared intently at the golden piano. A strange emotion flickered in his eyes. a mix of longing and pain. After standing for a long time, the chairman slowly approached the piano. With trembling hands, he opened the keyboard cover, and with his index finger, he pressed a key. A dull, lifeless sound filled the living room. Jaden held his breath. His tuner's ear instinctively analyzed the sound. The note was muffled. The sound, which should have resonated clearly, was blocked midway. It was like a person gasping for air, letting out a groan. The chairman's brows furrowed deeply. His expression was pained. He stood motionless before the piano for a long time, his clenched fists trembling slightly. Jaden's heart began to pound rapidly. That sound is definitely abnormal. It's not just from age. Something is wrong. His body moved first. He unconsciously took a step towards the piano. It was a tuner's instinct, an unavoidable habit to rush to a sick instrument. It was at that very moment. A cold sensation swept over his back. He turned his head to see Bradley standing at the living room entrance, glaring at Jaden. His eyes were like daggers. His lips moved silently. "Move one more step and you'll regret it." Jaden stopped. His heart pounded. The mop in his hands felt damp and cold. "Cleaner, what are you doing?" Bradley's low voice came from behind him. Jaden's heart sank, but instinctively, he bent deeper at the waist. "Excuse me, sir. I saw a stain on the floor, so I—" Jaden answered, frantically scrubbing the floor, being careful not to let his gaze fall on the piano. Bradley stared at the back of Jaden's neck for a long time. It felt as if holes were being drilled into his back. After a long while, Bradley followed the chairman upstairs. Only after their footsteps had completely faded did Jaden exhale. His hands were trembling. That night, back in his quarters, Jaden sat on his bed and looked down at his hands. In London, touching instruments was a given. If a pianist was anxious, Jaden would rush to inspect the piano. If a sound was off, he would immediately tune it. That was Jaden's role. But here, Jaden was a cleaner who could be fired for simply going near the piano, just one step closer. And Bradley was so hostile. What if he had actually touched it? The thought made him dizzy. Jaden tightly clenched his trembling hands. "I have to endure. If I get kicked out of here, it's truly over." The next morning dawned. Jaden started cleaning the living room even earlier than yesterday. He had to avoid Bradley's eyes. As he mopped, he carefully observed his surroundings. The muffled sound he'd heard when the chairman pressed the key yesterday kept replaying in his mind. But there was something strange. The air changed as he stepped closer to the center of the living room. Other parts of the mansion were comfortable. The temperature and humidity were just right. But specifically, within a 5-meter radius of the golden piano, it was different. It was so dry, his lips felt parched. Why is it so dry? Jaden squinted. For a piano, dryness was akin to poison. A soundboard made of the finest wood is extremely sensitive to humidity. If it's too dry, the wood contracts, making the sound muffled, and in severe cases, it can even crack. They're neglecting a $15 million masterpiece in such an environment? Jaden pretended to mop and slowly moved to the back of the piano. There, he discovered a built-in humidifier on the wall. It was clearly a high-end humidifier, but the power button light was off. Jaden paused. Is this a mistake, or was it intentionally turned off? Questions cascaded in his mind. But there was nothing Jaden could do right now. If he tampered with it and something went wrong, the blame would fall entirely on him. Jaden buried his cold suspicions in his heart and continued mopping. Days passed. Jaden had been at the mansion for over 10 days, but he had never once heard a proper melody flow from that magnificent piano. The mansion was always eerily silent, as if someone had deliberately stifled its sounds. Chairman Arthur would come down from the second floor every day at 5 p.m. He would stand before the piano, open the keyboard cover, raise his hands to play, then shake his head and turn away. He repeated the same action at the same time every day. Jaden watched him from afar, thinking, an instrument of this caliber should be played daily to keep it alive. Pianos are living instruments. If left unplayed, their sound hardens. Why is it being left like a stuffed animal? The chairman's retreating figure seemed to grow more desolate with each passing day. Each time he stood before the piano, his shoulders seemed to droop a little more. Clearly, this piano was more than just an instrument to him. Jaden looked down at the bleach bottle in his hand. Today, it felt unusually heavy. It was that night. Jaden, unable to bear the stuffiness of his cramped quarters, went outside. No one was in the garden behind the mansion. The cold night air filled his lungs. Jaden sat on a bench for a moment and looked up at the sky. Stars glittered as if they would spill down. Just then, a faint light appeared from the mansion's back gate. Jayden squinted. A black sedan silently drove into the estate, its headlights off. Jayden instinctively hid. He crouched behind a tree shadow, holding his breath. The sedan stopped, and the door opened. The person who emerged was an elderly gentleman carrying a bag. White-haired, wearing glasses, he looked somewhat dignified. But Jayden recognized his face instantly. That's one of New York's top veteran tuners. Jayden's eyes widened. He was a well-known figure in the industry. Why would such a person visit the mansion secretly at night? Just then, Bradley appeared from the back entrance. He greeted the tuner, whispering in a low voice, "Strictly confidential. It's a matter of the chairman's pride." The tuner nodded and entered the mansion. Jayden watched them from behind the tree. Only then did Jayden realize. Chairman Arthur Kingston was hiding the fact that the piano was broken. He was pretending everything was fine during the day, while secretly calling in experts at night. It was the pride of a global magnate. He didn't want anyone to know his piano was damaged. Jayden held his breath and waited. An hour passed. The mansion's back gate opened again. The tuner who had entered earlier emerged, but his appearance was completely different from when he went in. His confident posture was gone. He walked out, drenched in sweat, as if fleeing, his face pale. Jayden pressed himself against the wall and watched him. Before getting into the sedan, the tuner muttered to himself with a sigh. Unbelievable. This sound defies the laws of physics. In my 40 years of experience, I've never encountered anything like it. I can't even touch it. He shook his head repeatedly as he got into the car. The sedan silently left the estate. Jayden stood there for a long time. Even New York's best tuner fled, unable to fix it. What on earth is inside that piano? His heart began to pound rapidly. His tuner's instincts were awakening. A world-renowned expert had given up on the instrument. A sound that defies the laws of physics. Those words spun in his head. Jayden unconsciously looked down at his hands. He remembered the tuning tools he'd pawned, the leather bag inherited from his mentor, and the silver tuning hammer and precision tools inside. They were probably covered in dust in a dark corner of the pawn shop right now. If I had those tools, if I could open that piano myself. Jayden's eyes changed. A sharp light flickered in his blurry gaze. It wasn't the eyes of a cleaner. It was the eyes of a tuner. I might be able to find out why that piano is making such a sound. Jayden took a deep breath of the cold night air, and he headed to his basement quarters. His steps were faster than before. That night, Jayden couldn't sleep. He lay on his bed, staring at the ceiling, but his eyes wouldn't close. The tuner's fleeing words kept replaying in his mind. Unbelievable. This sound defies the laws of physics. What did a sound that defies the laws of physics even mean? Jayden had handled thousands of pianos in London. From antiques over 100 years old to brand new ones, he had dealt with instruments in every conceivable condition. If a sound was off, there was always a reason. A stretched string, a worn hammer, a crack in the soundboard. Whatever the problem, if he listened closely, the answer would reveal itself. But New York's best tuner had fled without even touching it? Jayden tossed and turned, eventually getting out of bed. The windowless basement quarters felt suffocating. He checked the clock. It was 3 a.m. Sleep wouldn't come anyway. Jayden fell deep into thought. Perhaps the experts were only looking for visible damage. Perhaps they only examined the internal structure of the piano, but didn't actually listen to the sound itself. For a tuner, the most important thing wasn't the eyes, but the ears. No matter how good the equipment, it was useless if one couldn't hear with their ears. Because sound doesn't lie. Jayden looked down at his hands, calloused and rough, but his ears were still alive. The divine ear, he was called, that sensitivity hadn't completely disappeared. If only I could listen to it myself. If only I could check the sound up close. But that was impossible. He was under orders not to approach the piano within a meter. Jayden sighed and lay back down. Eventually Jayden, still restless, got up at 4 a.m. as usual and started cleaning. As he mopped the corridor, his gaze kept darting towards the living room. The golden piano sparkled in the morning light. It was beautiful, but it looked somehow pained. What's inside there? What's stifling its sound like that? Curiosity burned in his chest, but Jayden turned his head away. He was just a cleaner, after all. It was afternoon. Jayden was cleaning the second-floor corridor when he passed the chairman's study. The door was slightly ajar. He felt a presence inside. Jayden paused. He knew he shouldn't look, but his feet wouldn't move. Through the crack in the door, he could see inside the study. Chairman Arthur stood by the window. He was a dignified old man, but now he looked somewhat desolate. In his hand was a faded photograph. Jayden held his breath and watched. The photo showed the chairman in his younger days, and beside him stood a woman, smiling brightly in front of the golden piano. Long hair, eyes curved like crescent moons. She was a beautiful person. The chairman muttered in a trembling voice, "Maria." Jayden's heart ached at how tenderly the name was spoken. "If this sound completely stops, will our time together truly end?" The chairman's shoulders trembled slightly. The tall, proud figure seemed to be struggling not to collapse, precarious as an old tree shaking at its roots. Jayden watched his back, a pang in his heart. That piano was not merely an instrument to the chairman. It was a memento, imbued with the spirit of his late wife. The piano his wife played, touched by her hands. For its sound to disappear would be like losing his wife twice over. Jayden suddenly thought of his mother. His mother, crying on the hospital bed, apologizing for being a burden. If something happened to his mother, Jayden felt he would collapse just like this. Just then, footsteps sounded at the end of the corridor. Jayden quickly grabbed his mop and pretended to clean the floor, keeping his head down and observing. It was Bradley. He brushed past Jayden and entered the study. The door opened a little wider. Jayden, pretending to mop, listened to the conversation inside. "Chairman." Bradley's voice was soft, but with a hint of coldness. "This is the 7th one. We've called in renowned experts, but they all shake their heads and leave." The chairman didn't reply. He just kept staring out the window. Bradley continued, "According to the experts, this instrument has reached the end of its life. No matter what we do, it's difficult to restore its original sound." The chairman still didn't reply. "Chairman, perhaps it's time to let go?" Bradley stepped closer. His voice lowered further. "Perhaps constantly looking at it isn't respectful to Mrs. Maria. She wouldn't want to see you suffer like this." Jayden tightened his grip on the mop. Let go? End of its life? An instrument of this caliber couldn't lose its sound so meaninglessly. A $15 million Steinway. With proper care, it could last another 100 years. But the chairman, instead of answering, lowered his head. His eyes, staring out the window, were empty. Bradley's words seemed to be swaying him. Jayden clenched his fists. The atmosphere in the mansion was flowing too unilaterally towards surrender, as if someone was orchestrating it. The next morning, unlike usual, the mansion's front gate was bustling. Jayden looked down from a second-floor window and saw a luxury sedan pulling in. Unlike the tuners who snuck in at night, this one arrived boldly through the main gate in broad daylight. Bradley himself went out to open the car door. From his demeanor, it seemed to be a very important guest. The person who emerged from the car was a middle-aged man. Dressed in a flashy suit, wearing gold-rimmed glasses, he had a somewhat arrogant look. Two young men, appearing to be assistants, followed him, carrying large bags. Jayden stepped back from the window and continued cleaning, but his ears remained focused on the downstairs. A moment later, voices were heard from the living room. Jayden, pretending to clean the second-floor corridor, approached the railing. He could see downstairs. Bradley was introducing the guest to the chairman. "Chairman, this is Mr. Miller, an instrument appraisal and repair expert from Europe, the one I mentioned before." The man named Miller bowed. "Chairman Kingston, it's an honor to meet you. I've heard much about you." The chairman nodded with a tired expression. His once sharp eyes were gone. Bradley spoke confidently. "Chairman, with Mr. Miller, you'll finally be able to make a decision. Mr. Miller is an expert, recognized even by European royalty. There's no need to waste money on meaningless tuning anymore." Jayden squinted. Bradley's tone was strange. It sounded as if he expected Miller to deliver a conclusion, not to fix the piano. Miller approached the piano in the center of the living room. He took out white gloves from his bag, put them on, and slowly began to examine the piano. He opened the keyboard cover, peered inside, tapped the soundboard. It was an expert's procedure. But to Jayden's eyes, something seemed off. It was too formal, perhaps, as if he had already decided on the conclusion and was merely putting on a show. Miller, with his gloved hands, tapped a few keys. Tunk, tunk. A dull, lifeless sound filled the living room. The chairman's face contorted in pain. Miller shook his head and sighed. His expression was one of deep regret. "Chairman." He turned to the chairman and spoke. "I will be frank. The internal soundboard of this piano is completely rotten." The chairman's eyes trembled. "Rotten?" "Yes. It only looks glossy on the outside, but inside, it's as good as dead. It seems the humidity control was inadequate. The wood has rotted from the inside out." Miller sadly stroked the piano. "Repair is impossible. Even if the most skilled tuner comes, it will be the same. Dead wood cannot produce sound. The chairman staggered. Bradley quickly moved to support him. Miller continued. In my opinion, it would be better to transfer it to my workshop and dismantle it. Its value as a piano is gone, but the pure gold ornamentation and some parts can be preserved. If you dispose of them well, it would be better for your reputation, Chairman. Dispose. The moment that word dropped into the living room, Jaden's hands, which were mopping the floor from the second-floor railing, stopped. What? Dispose? Jaden's ears perked up. The sound he heard when Miller pressed the keys replayed in his mind. Thunk, thunk, thunk. That dull, lifeless sound. But to Jaden's ears, it sounded completely different. That's not the sound of rotten wood. Jaden had tuned thousands of pianos in London. He had also encountered pianos with rotten soundboards. Such instruments had their sound completely muddled. The notes wouldn't resonate but would die out weakly. But the sound of this piano was different. It was muffled, yes, but it felt blocked. Not a dead sound, but a trapped one. As if someone was strangling its neck. It's a lie. That's not a rotten sound, but a sound suppressed by someone. Jaden's heart began to pound rapidly. Just then, Miller turned his head. He looked up at the second-floor railing, and his eyes met Jaden's. It was a fleeting moment. Miller's eyes gleamed coldly, as if warning him. What are you looking at? Jaden quickly lowered his gaze. He clutched his mop and frantically scrubbed the floor. His heart pounded. That man is hiding something. His intuition screamed a warning. Mr. Miller and Bradley. It seemed there was something going on between the two. From downstairs, the chairman's shattered voice was heard. Dispose. Is there truly no other way? Chairman, I'm deeply sorry, but there's nothing we can do. You can't revive what's dead. Miller's voice was soft, but to Jaden's ears, it sounded like a serpent's whisper. Jaden clenched the mop, his knuckles white. That piano isn't dead. Someone is deliberately trying to kill it. But there was no proof. Jaden was just a cleaner, and Miller was an expert, recognized by European royalty. Whatever Jaden said, no one would believe him. Jaden gritted his teeth and continued mopping, but something was seething in his chest. His tuner's instinct. The habit of rushing to a sick instrument. The mission to reveal the truth when he heard a lie. The divine ear was still alive. After Miller left, Jaden gathered his cleaning tools and went downstairs. His mind was in a whirl. The moment his eyes met Miller's, kept coming back to him. That fleeting exchange of glances. Miller's eyes clearly held a warning. It felt like a silent threat. Keep quiet about whatever, you know. As he passed through the living room towards the corridor, he heard Bradley's voice. He was on the phone. Jaden stopped and hid behind a corner. Yes, send the transport crew tomorrow morning. We'll be moving a piano. Jaden's ears perked up. Send it to Mr. Miller's workshop. It needs to be dismantled. Please hurry, as we need to process it quickly. The call ended. Bradley muttered to himself. By tomorrow morning, this piece of junk will be finished. Jaden's heart sank. Tomorrow morning? So fast. A $15 million masterpiece was about to be disposed of overnight. It would be sent to Miller's workshop, stripped of its pure gold, and the rest scrapped. The piano his wife played, the instrument imbued with Maria's spirit, would disappear like that. Jaden clenched his fist. The sound he'd heard earlier came back to him, the muffled note when Miller pressed the keys. But to Jaden's ears, it sounded different. Not a dead sound, but a blocked sound. A sound as if someone was strangling its neck. But there was no proof. All Jaden had was his own ear. Back in his basement quarters, Jaden slumped onto the bed. What should I do? If he stepped forward now, he would surely be fired. A cleaner challenging an expert from Europe would be treated as a madman. In the worst case, he could even be sued. Then what about my mother's surgery fees? Jaden took out a faded photograph from his pocket. It was his mother's picture from Singapore. Her faintly smiling face in the hospital bed. Her voice, crying and apologizing for being a burden, echoed in his ears. If I get kicked out of here, it's truly over. His mind told him so. I should stay still. I should endure. But his heart was different. If you just let that piano go, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. Jaden closed his eyes. Memories of London flashed before him. Moments behind the stage, holding a pianist's hand and saying, I've tuned it, don't worry. The perfect sound filling the auditorium, the audience giving a standing ovation, and Jaden quietly smiling in the darkness. Tuners were doctors for instruments. They treated sick pianos and restored their true voices. That was what Jaden had always done. But now, seeing an instrument dying before his eyes, was he supposed to do nothing? Jaden opened his eyes. At least I have to check whether my ears are right or wrong. He made up his mind. He looked at the clock. 11 p.m. He had to wait until everyone was asleep. Jaden lay on his bed, staring at the ceiling. His heart pounded. He hadn't trembled this much even during his first tuning in London. Back then, if he failed, there was always another chance. But now, it was different. If he failed, he would lose everything. Time passed slowly. Midnight came, then 1 a.m. The mansion was completely silent. No footsteps, no voices. At 2 a.m., Jaden got out of bed. He changed into dark clothes instead of his cleaner's uniform. He looked around his quarters for usable tools. His precision tuning tools were at the pawn shop in Geylang. All he had now were cleaning tools. Jaden rummaged through his bag and pulled out a thin, flathead screwdriver, a pair of tweezers, and a small flashlight. It was embarrassingly meager equipment, but it was better than nothing. Jaden put the tools in his pocket and opened the door to his quarters. The corridor was pitch black. Only the emergency lights flickered faintly. Jaden crept up the stairs, trying to muffle his footsteps. Each creak of the old wood made his heart skip a beat. What if I get caught? He tried not to think about it. He had to focus only on moving forward. He reached the first floor. The corridor leading to the living room stretched out, long and dark. Moonlight streamed in through the windows. He stood at the living room entrance. The door was open. He peered inside, and the golden piano sat in the center of the living room, gleaming softly in the moonlight. Jaden swallowed hard. Don't approach that piano within a meter. Bradley's warning echoed in his mind, but Jaden took a step forward, and then another. Finally, he crossed the line into the forbidden zone. He stood before the piano. Up close, it was breathtakingly beautiful. Pure gold ornamentation sparkled under the moonlight, and the ebony keys gleamed coldly. But at the same time, it looked sad, like someone who hadn't been able to voice their true feelings for a long time. Jaden knelt. He examined the lower part of the piano, the section connected to the pedals, the inside of the soundboard. He turned on his flashlight and shone the beam. Dust had accumulated inside, but the structure was intact. There was no rotten part anywhere. This was the first proof that Miller's words were a lie. Jaden took out his screwdriver. He carefully began to check the fixing pins at the bottom of the keys. He concentrated all his senses on his fingertips. He could feel what his eyes couldn't see. 1, 2, 3. He checked each pin. At the fourth pin, his hand stopped. He felt something strange. A thin, smooth object was wrapped around the head of the pin. Jaden brought the flashlight closer. It was a transparent nylon string. It was almost invisible to the naked eye, so thin that it could only be barely discerned when light was directly shone on it. This would have been difficult for even a regular tuner to find. It was an intricate device that only someone with fingertip sensitivity and a keen ear could discover. Jaden held his breath. This was installed intentionally. If a nylon string is wrapped around a pin, the string tension is subtly altered. This makes the sound muffled and unstable. The piano sounds as if it's broken. But in reality, nothing is genuinely damaged. Simply removing the string restores its original sound. Someone has been tightening this string regularly to slowly, secretly kill the piano. The rotten soundboard Miller spoke of never existed in the first place. Jaden's hands trembled violently. Who did this? The answer was obvious. Bradley and Miller. They conspired to steal the mansion's most precious possession. Jaden brought the screwdriver to the nylon string. He just needed to cut it. Removing the string would allow the piano to breathe again. His heart pounded wildly. He tensed his fingers. It was at that very moment. Tap, tap, tap. Footsteps echoed from the living room entrance. The sound of shoe heels clicking on the marble floor. Jaden froze. His heart plummeted. The footsteps grew closer. Jaden quickly turned off his flashlight and hid under the piano. He held his breath, his eyes wide open. He felt a presence in the darkness. Someone was entering the living room. Who's there? A cold, sharp voice resonated against the walls. It was Bradley. Jaden's breath caught in his throat. The tip of the screwdriver in his hand trembled. I definitely heard something, Bradley muttered as he entered the living room, holding his phone. The light from the screen faintly illuminated the darkness. Footsteps approached the piano. 1 step, 2 steps. Jaden, crouched under the piano, squeezed his eyes shut. Please, please, just go away. His heartbeat was so loud, he felt Bradley must hear it. Cold sweat dripped all over his body. Bradley's shoe tips stopped in front of the piano. Jayden, holding his breath, remained crouched under the piano. Bradley's black shoes were visible right before his eyes, so close he could reach out and touch them. His heart pounded so hard it felt like his ribs would break. "I definitely heard something," Bradley muttered, shining his phone light around. The beam swept across the living room floor, narrowly missing the piano's legs. Jayden huddled himself as small as possible, covering his mouth with his hand to prevent even a gasp. Just then, the tweezers slipped from Jayden's pocket. Clink. The small metallic sound echoed in the silent living room. That tiny sound felt as loud as a bomb. "Who's there?" Bradley bent down. The phone light shone directly under the piano. Jayden's face, crouching in the darkness, was fully revealed. Their eyes met. "You little." Bradley's hand grabbed Jayden's collar. Pulled by the strong force, Jayden was flung onto the floor. The cold marble pressed against his cheek. Pain spread through his back, but he couldn't even groan. "Get your hands off it now!" Bradley snatched the screwdriver from Jayden's hand, and he threw it forcefully across the living room. Clang! The sharp sound of metal hitting the marble floor echoed. "What do you think you're doing? In the middle of the night?" Bradley pressed his foot onto Jayden's back. Jayden gasped for breath. His chest felt crushed. The commotion began to awaken the mansion. Footsteps were heard in the distance. 2 security guards rushed over. And a moment later, an unexpected figure appeared at the end of the corridor. It was Miller. In his pajamas, his hair disheveled. He had decided to stay overnight at the mansion to transport the piano tomorrow morning. "What's this commotion?" Miller rubbed his eyes and entered the living room. His gaze alternated between Jayden, sprawled on the floor, and the open piano cover. "This fellow was touching the piano in the middle of the night," Bradley pointed at Jayden. "With a screwdriver, no less. I told him to clean, but he tried to dismantle it completely. Isn't this just a madman?" Miller's eyes flickered for a moment, but he quickly regained his composure. A sneer twisted his lips. "Huh, a cleaner, messing with a piano. What does he even know?" Jayden gritted his teeth, still sprawled on the floor. Bradley's foot pressed harder on his back, making it difficult to breathe. But what Jayden had discovered moments ago remained vivid in his mind. The transparent nylon string, the shackles wrapped around the pin, twisting the string tension. Just then, heavy footsteps sounded from the second-floor staircase. Everyone's gaze turned towards the stairs. Chairman Arthur slowly descended. The old man in a silk gown looked tired, as if he hadn't fully woken up. But his eyes were sharp, like an awl. The chairman stopped in the middle of the living room. He slowly surveyed the scene. Jayden pressed to the floor, the open piano cover, the screwdriver lying across the room. The chairman's brows furrowed deeply. "What is going on?" His voice was low and cold. The temperature in the living room seemed to drop several degrees. Bradley quickly replied, "Chairman, this cleaner laid his hands on the piano in the middle of the night. With a screwdriver, too. This is clear vandalism." The chairman looked down at Jayden. His humble figure sprawled on the floor, his cement-stained hands, disheveled hair, sweaty face. A deep disappointment crossed the chairman's eyes. "I gave him a special chance because Professor Lim sent him," the chairman said slowly. "Is this all he amounted to?" His voice contained something more terrifying than anger. Cold contempt. Jayden felt his heart freeze. Bradley, as if he had been waiting, pulled out his phone. "Chairman, I'll call the police." Wielding a screwdriver at a $15 million instrument, he's not a normal person. "We must also file a claim for damages." "Yes," the chairman nodded. "Call them now." Just as Bradley's fingers were about to dial the number, "I didn't break it," Jayden yelled, his voice strained as if his throat would burst. Bradley's foot pressed harder on his back, but Jayden didn't stop. "I didn't try to break it." Everyone's gaze turned to Jayden. The living room fell silent for a moment. Jayden gritted his teeth and lifted his head, still sprawled on the floor, looking directly into the chairman's eyes. "Chairman, that piano isn't broken. Someone deliberately stifled its sound. Intentionally." Silence hung in the living room. Miller's face stiffened slightly. Bradley's foot paused. Miller burst into a sneer. "What? Intentionally? I personally examined it and diagnosed a rotten soundboard." A cleaner, challenging an expert? Jayden didn't even look at Miller. He only looked at the chairman. "I will tune it." The chairman's eyebrows moved slightly. "What?" "I've tuned thousands of pianos. I know what a rotten soundboard sounds like. The sound of that piano isn't rotten. It's blocked. Someone deliberately blocked it." "Stop this nonsense," Miller shouted. "Chairman, will you believe this man? A cleaner, overturning the diagnosis of a top European expert? This is completely mad." Jaden still only looked at the chairman. I checked the piano's interior earlier. There was a nylon string wrapped around the fixing pin at the bottom of the keys. It's transparent, so it's not visible to the eye, but it was definitely there. That's what's twisting the string tension and ruining the sound. The chairman's eyes wavered. Just remove the string, and its original sound will return. Give me 3 minutes. I will prove it. Bradley interjected. Chairman, you mustn't listen to this man. He's crazy. How can you trust someone who secretly touches the piano in the middle of the night? If I'm wrong, Jaden continued, I will accept any punishment for everything I've done. Prison, whatever. But if I'm right, Jaden took a deep breath. That piano will come back to life. The sound Mrs. Maria used to play will return. At those words, the chairman's expression changed. Something seemed to crack in his hardened face. Maria. That name had clearly caused ripples in the chairman's heart. A long silence followed. Miller and Bradley exchanged uneasy glances. The chairman looked down at Jaden, motionless. Only the ticking of the clock's second hand echoed in the living room. Finally, the chairman spoke. Bradley, let him up. Bradley asked in a surprised tone. Chairman, remove your foot. Let him up. Bradley hesitated, then took his foot off. Jaden slowly got up. His entire body ached, but he showed no sign of it. He straightened his back and stood before the chairman. The chairman stared intently at Jaden. After a long gaze, he spoke slowly. All right. Bradley and Miller's faces stiffened simultaneously. If you're right, and the sound my wife used to play returns. The chairman took a step closer. I'll give you $1 million. The air in the living room froze. The number million seemed to hang in the air. Jaden gasped. $1 million would be enough to pay for his mother's surgery and clear his father's debt, with money left over. He could retrieve his tuning tools from the pawn shop. Everything would be resolved. But the chairman's voice grew even colder. If, after 3 minutes, that terrible metallic sound still comes out, you won't go to the police station. You'll go to prison. The chairman looked directly into Jaden's eyes. You'll personally witness how my lawyers can ruin your life. Vandalism, trespassing, attempted fraud, we can add as many charges as we want. You'll rot for years in New York's most notorious prison. The chairman tilted his head slightly. Will you do it? Jaden swallowed hard. $1 million in prison. Success or ruin? It was too risky a stake for a gamble. If he failed, everything would be over. Far from affording his mother's surgery, Jaden himself would be imprisoned. What would happen to his mother then? But he couldn't back down. The sensation of the nylon string he'd touched earlier was vivid. It was definitely there. Jaden's ears had never been wrong. Not in London, not before. Jaden slowly nodded. I will do it. His voice came out firmer than he expected. 3 minutes is enough. Bradley said urgently, Chairman, this is too dangerous. You can't entrust the piano to such a madman. Silence, the chairman said coldly. Bradley flinched and fell silent. The chairman gestured to the security guards. Release him. The guards backed away. Jaden brushed off his rumpled clothes and straightened himself. Miller crossed his arms and sneered. All right, go ahead and try. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens in 3 minutes. A cleaner beating Europe's top expert? It's laughable. Bradley looked at his wristwatch, his lips trembling. Jaden went to pick up the screwdriver that had fallen to the floor. He bent down and picked it up. The handle was cold. A cheap tool used for cleaning. But now, it was his only weapon. Jaden slowly walked towards the piano. The golden piano gleamed faintly under the light. It was beautiful, but it looked sad, like someone who hadn't been able to voice their true feelings for a long time. Jaden stood before the keys. His heart pounded wildly. 3 minutes. Within that time, he had to prove everything. Jaden closed his eyes. He recalled memories of London. Thousands of tunings, the sensation of his fingertips having touched keys tens of thousands of times. His ability, called the divine ear. You can do this! Jaden opened his eyes. He tightened his grip on the screwdriver, and he reached his hand into the dark interior of the piano. The mansion's clock coldly ticked its second hand. Tick, tick, tick. 30 seconds of the 3 minutes had already passed. Bradley stood with his arms crossed, glaring at Jaden. A sneer twisted his lips as if saying, Go on, try it. Miller constantly checked his wristwatch, trying to hide his anxiety, but the beads of sweat on his forehead betrayed his unease. Jaden knelt before the piano. All surrounding sounds faded. Bradley's gaze, Miller's sneer, the chairman's cold eyes. In Jaden's world now, only the piano existed. He concentrated his senses on his fingertips. He didn't have sophisticated tuning tools. All he had was a cleaning screwdriver and tweezers. But Jaden had something else, the memory of his fingertips. Jaden carefully lifted the piano's top lid. The strings were exposed. Taut steel strings gleamed with a silvery light under the moonlight. They were beautiful, but these beautiful strings were unable to produce their true sound. "What are you doing? Don't touch the soundboard," Miller shouted. His voice was sharp, but Jaden didn't listen. He reached his hand deep inside the piano, towards the pin block. It was where the tuning pins, which adjusted string tension, were tightly embedded. 1 minute gone, Bradley's voice rang out. 2 minutes left. 120 seconds. Something touched Jaden's fingertips. A cold, smooth sensation. It was what he had felt earlier. Jaden took out his flashlight and shone the beam. There it was, indeed. The transparent nylon string was skillfully wrapped between the pins. It was so thin that it could only barely be seen when light was shone directly on it. A typical tuner would never have discovered it in their lifetime. It was an intricate device that only someone with fingertip sensitivity and the divine ear could find. Jaden took out the tweezers. He tried to grasp the nylon string, but the string was firmly fixed between the steel pins. It slipped, even when he tried to pinch it with the tweezers. The string was too thin. 1 minute, 30 seconds. Bradley's voice was laced with derision. 90 seconds left. Sweat beaded on Jaden's forehead. His fingers trembled slightly. He felt a rush of urgency, but forced himself to calm down. Hurry makes mistakes. For a tuner, haste was taboo. Think. Jaden took out the screwdriver. A thin, flathead screwdriver. A cheap tool used for cleaning. But now, it was his only weapon. He carefully inserted the tip of the screwdriver between the pins. He decided to use the principle of leverage. Create a gap between the pins and extract the nylon string. But he had to be careful. If he misjudged the force, the string could break. A string worth tens of thousands of dollars. Then it would truly be vandalism. 0.5 millimeters. That's all the gap he needed to create. 0.5 millimeters. A little wider than the thickness of a hair. He had to pull out the nylon string through that minuscule gap. Jaden held his breath and applied force to his fingers. Slowly, very slowly, he turned the screwdriver. 2 minutes gone, Bradley yelled. 60 seconds left. Jaden's heart pounded wildly, but his hands didn't stop. The screwdriver moved ever so slightly. A tiny gap appeared between the pins. Just a little more. Just a little more. 30 seconds left. Bradley's voice sounded certain of victory. Miller sneered. "See? I told you it wouldn't work. It's rotten wood. No matter what you do, it's useless." Jaden didn't listen. He focused only on his fingertips. Click! With a small sound, he felt something release. The taut nylon string lost its tension. Jaden grabbed the end of the string with his tweezers and slowly pulled it out. The transparent string slipped through his fingers. 10 seconds, Bradley yelled. Jaden quickly returned to the front of the piano. There was no time to sit on the chair. He placed his hands on the keys while standing. 5, 4, 3, 2, Bradley shouted the countdown. His voice was filled with certainty of victory. Jaden's finger pressed a key deeply. Instantly, the living room fell silent. The metallic sound that had been heard until yesterday was gone. That muffled, blocked sound. Instead, a clear, deep resonance burst from the piano. Like ripples spreading when a stone is thrown into a clear lake, a luminous and pure sound filled the entire living room. Bradley's countdown stopped. His mouth hung open, frozen. Miller's face turned ashen. His previous sneer was nowhere to be found. Jaden didn't stop. His fingers glided over the keys. D, E, F number, G. Notes flowed together. It was an improvised melody, but the harmony was perfect. Music poured from the fingertips of the tuner who had honed his craft for years. The golden piano began to sing. It was as if someone whose throat had been blocked for a long time was finally breathing. The suppressed sound burst forth, clear, rich, and deeply resonant. The very sound that maestras in London had praised. The timbre, known as heavenly resonance, was perfectly resurrected in the middle of a grand New York mansion. Jaden's fingers played the final chord and stopped. The lingering sound filled the living room. No one spoke. Not even a breath was heard. Miller stumbled backward, his face pale, his lips trembling. Bradley stood frozen, eyes wide. The phone in his hand fell to the floor, but he didn't even flinch. In the silence, someone moved. It was Chairman Arthur. The shoulders of the proud old man began to tremble slightly. The strong facade he had maintained, struggling not to collapse, seemed to be cracking. The chairman slowly walked towards the piano, his steps wavering. The dignity of a global magnate was gone. Only the figure of a man who had lost his wife remained. The chairman, with trembling hands, caressed the piano. As if reuniting with someone long lost, his fingers stroked the golden surface. This sound, the chairman's voice cracked. This is the very sound Maria used to play for me. The chairman's knees buckled. He sank to the floor before the piano. Tears streamed down the eyes of the strong old man, silently but ceaselessly, tracing his wrinkled cheeks and falling to the floor. Maria, you were still here. The chairman rested his head against the piano, his shoulders shaking. All the longing accumulated over decades seemed to be bursting forth. Jaden quietly stepped back. He exhaled. His hands were trembling. As the tension released, all strength drained from his body. I did it. Jaden looked down at his hands, calloused and stained with cement. But these hands had just performed a miracle, and at the same time, he realized he could save his mother. For a moment, only the chairman's wailing filled the living room. No one moved. Miller stood with a pale face, and Bradley was frozen, unable to even pick up his dropped phone. The security guards looked at each other, at a loss. The chairman, kneeling before the piano, continued to shake. An old man who had lived a strong life was weeping like a child, as if he had heard the voice of his departed wife again. The silence was broken by Jaden's voice. Chairman. Jaden slowly stepped forward. In his hand was the nylon string he had removed from the piano. A transparent, thin string, barely visible when held up to the light, which he held out to the chairman. What is this? The chairman wiped his tears and looked up. He stared at what Jaden offered. The soundboard being rotten was a lie. Jaden's voice was calm but firm. Someone wrapped this string inside the piano, to twist the string tension and kill the sound. They intended to slowly damage the instrument to have it scrapped. The chairman's eyes slowly changed. Sadness receded, replaced by cold fury. His gaze fell on Miller. Miller. The chairman slowly rose. His voice was low and submerged. You clearly said it yourself, didn't you? That the soundboard was rotten, that it couldn't be fixed, that it was better to dismantle it and salvage the gold. Miller's face grew even paler. His lips trembled violently. I misidentified it. It was a mistake. I didn't know myself that such a device would be there. A mistake? The chairman took a step closer. Miller stumbled backward. An expert recognized by European royalty couldn't see such a rudimentary device, even with eyes. Chairman, the chairman's eyes narrowed. Did you know from the start that the string was there and who installed it? Miller was speechless. He opened and closed his mouth repeatedly. Not a single excuse came out. The chairman's gaze turned to Bradley. Bradley's body flinched. The chief butler who had been by the chairman's side for 30 years, the most trusted person. He was trembling now. You brought Miller, didn't you? You booked the piano transport. You intended to send this piano to Miller's workshop tomorrow morning. The chairman slowly approached. Bradley backed away. What was your motive, exactly? Chairman, it's a misunderstanding. I merely wanted to silence. The chairman's voice struck the living room. Bradley clamped his mouth shut. The chairman gestured to the security guards. Arrest these two, and call the security team. Secure Bradley's personal safe and laptop everything. Yes, Chairman. The security guards moved. They grabbed Miller and Bradley's arms. What is this? I didn't do anything. Bradley struggled, but it was useless. Two guards held him firmly. Chairman, please. I've served you for 30 years. Please trust me. The chairman didn't reply. He coldly turned his back. An hour later, the security team brought Bradley's personal safe and laptop. The chairman personally inspected them in his study. Jaden was also present. The chairman had asked him to stay. When the laptop was opened, shocking files poured out. Emails exchanged with Miller, transaction details with overseas collectors, and a detailed plan. The chairman's face grew increasingly rigid. Bradley's plan was meticulous. Phase 1. Slowly damage the piano. Turn off the humidifier and install nylon strings to kill its sound. Gradually, slowly, so the chairman wouldn't notice. Phase 2. Call in an expert to declare it irreparable. Enlist Miller to make a false diagnosis of a rotten soundboard. Phase 3. Make the chairman fall into despair over losing his wife's memento. Capitalize on his impaired judgment to obtain his signature on succession documents for the company. Phase 4. Secretly divert the piano that was supposed to be scrapped. Sell it to an overseas collector for $10 million and pocket the slush fund. The chairman closed the laptop. His hands were trembling. 30 years. The chairman's voice cracked. 30 years I kept him by my side, and he was this kind of man. Jayden stood silently. He didn't know what to say. The chairman picked up the phone. Call the police. Attempted fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, vandalism. We can add as many charges as possible. Treat Miller as an accomplice. The chairman, ending the call, looked out the window. The dawn light was slowly breaking. He tried to exploit even the last trace of my wife. The chairman's shoulders trembled slightly. Maria, how much she cherished that piano. An hour later, the police arrived. Miller and Bradley were handcuffed and led out of the mansion. Bradley struggled until the very end. Chairman, please forgive me. I've been loyal my whole life. But the chairman stood by the window, his back turned, and didn't reply. The mansion staff gathered at the entrance, watching the scene. Their eyes were wide with shock. Bradley, who had been the mansion's de facto power for 30 years, was now being led to a police car in handcuffs. The man who had commanded and threatened everyone. And at the beginning of it all was the Asian cleaner they had ignored and ridiculed. Themselves, who had scoffed, a cleaner staring at the piano, and pointed fingers, saying, "Isn't he crazy?" That man had brought down the mansion's power broker. After the police car left, only Jayden and the chairman remained in the living room. Day had broken. Morning sunlight poured in through the windows. The golden piano gleamed radiantly in its light. The chairman slowly turned to Jayden. "You." The chairman stared intently at Jayden. "What exactly is your true identity? I heard you were a cleaner. How could you produce such a sound? How did you find that device?" Jayden was silent for a moment. He looked down at his hands. These hands were originally for a different job. Jayden lifted his head. He looked directly into the chairman's eyes. "I was the principal piano tuner at the Royal College of Music, London. My name is Jayden Tan." The air in the living room stopped. The chairman's eyes widened. "The principal tuner at Royal College of Music?" "Yes, I studied under Professor Lim." The chairman's expression changed, becoming complex. Surprise, bewilderment, and then something clicked. "Lim? Professor Lim?" This time, Jayden was surprised. "You know Professor Lim?" The chairman slowly nodded. "He's been my friend for 40 years. We met in Vienna when we were young. He's also the one who introduced me to my wife, Maria." "I didn't know," Jayden said honestly. "I didn't know Professor Lim knew you. He just told me there was a good opportunity and to take it, even if it was just a cleaner's job." The chairman fell silent in thought for a moment. Then he smiled wryly. "Lim, that friend knows me too well." The chairman looked out the window. "Knowing how stubborn I am, how much I dislike receiving help, do you think I would have accepted him if he said he was sending his student as a tuner? Especially when I was boasting to Bradley about having experts." A hint of self-mockery was in the chairman's voice. "And he probably suspected Bradley. He knew Bradley would block a formal tuner, so he sent you in as a cleaner, so I would see it for myself." Jayden couldn't say anything. Professor Lim's face came to mind. His calm voice over the phone. "Don't leave the piano side." There was such deep meaning in those words. The chairman looked at Jayden for a long time, and then he slowly shook his head. "I was blind." A sigh was mixed in the chairman's voice. "I gave a mop to a genius tuner. Made him scrub floors, made him smell bleach." "It's all right, Chairman," Jayden replied quietly. "Thanks to that, I was able to meet that piano." Jayden looked at the golden piano, gleaming brilliantly in the morning sun. "And I was able to revive Mrs. Maria's voice." Tears welled up in the chairman's eyes again. But this time, it wasn't sadness. It was gratitude. "Thank you, Jayden." The chairman took Jayden's hand, his rough, calloused hand. He held it tightly with both hands. "You brought my wife back to me." Jayden didn't say anything. He simply held the chairman's hand in return. "I must keep my promise." The chairman pulled out a folded piece of paper from his pocket. Jayden's eyes widened. It was a check. The amount written on it was $1 million. "Jayden, you didn't just save a piano. You saved my wife's voice. And my last memory." Jayden's hands trembled. As he accepted the check, his eyes welled up. "With this money I can pay for my mother's surgery and clear my father's debt, with money left over." "Thank you, Chairman." His voice cracked. He bowed deeply. Chairman Arthur Kingston gently patted Jayden's shoulder. "Thank you, Jayden. I am the grateful one." A moment of silence passed. The golden piano sparkled in the sunlight. The clear resonance from last night still seemed to echo in their ears. "And I have a proposal." The chairman's eyes became serious. Would you be willing to continue managing this piano? A formal contract, of course. The world's greatest tuner, looking after the world's most precious piano. What do you say? Jayden was speechless for a moment. He had come in as a cleaner, scrubbing floors, and now he was becoming the official caretaker of this piano. It would be an honor. His reply was brief, but his voice contained thousands of emotions. The day he returned to Singapore, the hospital corridor seemed unusually long. Jayden paid the full surgery amount and headed to his mother's room. His heart pounded. The surgery was already over, and the doctor said it was successful, but he couldn't rest easy until he saw his mother's face himself. He opened the door to the room. His mother was leaning against the bed, looking out the window. The fatigue of the surgery still lingered on her face, but her eyes were clear. The moment she saw Jayden, tears welled up in her eyes. Jayden. Her voice trembled faintly. Jayden quickly walked over and took his mother's hand. Her hand was still thin and frail, but he felt its warmth. The surgery went well, they said. You'll be all right now. His mother stroked her son's hand. Calluses and scars remained on his fingers. Traces of carrying cement bags, scrubbing restaurant floors, and going to the dawn labor market. How much you've suffered with these hands, my son. Tears streamed down his mother's face. Jayden's eyes also welled up. But he smiled. With these hands, I also saved a piano. So everything is all right, Mum. His mother looked at her son's face for a long time, and then she managed to smile. Spring flowers were blooming outside the window. It felt as if spring had come to the hospital room as well. A week later, his mother began rehabilitation therapy. A month later, she could walk the hospital corridors on her own. Jayden called every day, whether in New York or London. Hearing his mother's voice was the start of his day. A year passed. Backstage at Carnegie Hall, one of the world's most famous concert halls, was quiet. 30 minutes until the performance. Jayden knelt before a grand piano. In his hand was a familiar silver tuning hammer, the very tool he had pawned a year ago. After receiving the check, Jayden's first destination was the pawn shop. He couldn't describe how much he had missed the weight of his old leather bag when he retrieved it. When he opened the bag and took out the hammer, his fingers trembled involuntarily. He vowed never to let it go again. Now, that hammer was tapping the strings once more. Ding! A clear sound filled the backstage area. Jayden listened intently. The minute tremors, the amplitude of the sound waves, the string tension, everything was conveyed to his fingertips and ears. The divine ear, indeed. A familiar voice came from behind. He turned his head to see Maestro Dubois standing there. It was the pianist he had shared the stage with in London a year ago. It's an honor to tune your piano, Maestro, Jayden said as he stood up. Maestro Dubois smiled. The honor is mine, to have the world's greatest tuner touch my piano. The two looked at each other for a moment. A lot had happened in a year. Jayden had left London, fallen to rock bottom, and then risen again. In the process, his hands had acquired scars, but his ears had grown sharper. Tonight's performance will be excellent, Jayden said quietly. Maestro Dubois nodded. Of course. It's a piano tuned by you. Backstage, staff bustled about. Lights came on, and murmurs were heard from the audience. 3,000 seats filled with eager spectators awaited. The concert began. Maestro Dubois' fingers flew across the keys. Chopin's Ballade filled the auditorium. The melody was as gentle as the wind, then crashed down like a powerful waterfall. 3,000 people held their breath. Jayden stood in the darkness backstage, listening to the sound. It was beautiful. Every note of the piano resonated perfectly. The high notes were clear, the low notes deep. It was Maestro Dubois' skill, but also the power of the strings Jayden had tuned. Tuners don't stand on stage. They don't receive applause. But their touch is in that sound. Professor Lim's words came back to him. Don't leave the piano's side. Jayden hadn't left. Even while carrying cement bags, even while standing in the rain outside the pawn shop, he never let go of his passion for the piano. And in the end, he returned to the piano's side. The concert ended. Thunderous applause erupted. Maestro Dubois bowed in the center of the stage. Then he turned and bowed towards backstage. The audience didn't know it, but it was an homage to Jayden. Jayden smiled. Quietly. A month later, an article appeared in a specialized magazine. Carnegie Hall's hidden hero, tuner Jayden Tan. The article stated, the world's greatest pianists seek him out. Pianos touched by his hands resonate differently. In the industry, they call him the Maestro of Maestros. Jayden showed the article to his mother. In their small apartment in Singapore, his mother read the article, tears streaming down her face. Our Jaden is truly amazing. Jaden held his mother's hand. The calluses were still there on her hand, but now they were not a mark of shame. They were proof of the path he had walked. It was a spring afternoon. Jaden visited Chairman Kingston's mansion in New York. The golden piano still gleamed in the center of the living room. Jaden opened the lid and looked at the keys. A year ago, he had hidden under this piano and cut that nylon string. 3 minutes. 180 seconds. It was a gamble with his life. Jaden placed his hands on the keys, and he pressed a single note. Ding! A clear, deep resonance filled the entire living room. In that sound was the warmth that Chairman Arthur Kingston's wife, Maria, had loved. The sweat and tears Jaden had shed, his desperate longing for his mother. Jaden closed his eyes. Life, he thought, was like a piano. There are moments when strings break, notes die, and everything seems to collapse. But if you don't give up, you can tune it again. You can make it resonate again. He smiled. A tuned life. A new melody. It begins now. How was the story? Jaden's journey, from the shining stages of London to the cement dust of a dawn labor market, and back to the backstage of Carnegie Hall, tells us this. No matter how much life goes awry, if you don't lose the true self within you, you can rise again. Even if your hands develop calluses, the sound your ears remember will never disappear. I hope this story offers a little comfort to those who had a tough day today. If today's story resonated with you, please press subscribe and like. And please leave a warm comment for our protagonist, Jaden. We'll be back with even better stories.